Hey, the VIP line isn't for black guys looking for free upgrades. Officer Caleb Ross barked the words as he slammed his forearm into Isaiah Monroe's chest, sending the quiet black man stumbling backward until his boarding pass fluttered across the polished airport floor. His worn duffel bag slipped from his shoulder, drawing amused glances from nearby travelers. Caleb pointed toward the crowded economy line with a mocking grin. Go stand where you belong. You're holding up people who actually paid to be here. A well-dressed businessman, Grant Whitaker, laughed and folded his arms. I knew the black guy would be the one causing trouble. They always think confidence can replace a first-class ticket. Several passengers chuckled. Others pulled out their phones. Patricia Vale, the VIP lounge manager, walked over without even looking at Isaiah's boarding pass. We don't need to check his reservation, she scoffed. Just look at him. Designer luggage doesn't come in worn duffel bags. Escort him out before he embarrasses the rest of our guests. Isaiah slowly picked up his boarding pass, keeping his voice calm. I have every right to stand here. Save the speech, Caleb sneered, kicking Isaiah's duffel bag several feet away. People like you always play the victim when you get caught. Before Isaiah could respond, the terminal suddenly fell silent. An elderly Korean man, surrounded by international Taekwondo officials, elite athletes, and television cameras, walked straight toward the confrontation. The moment he saw Isaiah, his eyes filled with disbelief. He stopped only inches away, bowed almost 90 degrees before the stunned black man, and said in a trembling voice, "Master, we've finally found you." Not a single person in the terminal dared to speak. If you think this story is about an airport misunderstanding, stay with us because the next few minutes will expose a truth that no one in that terminal saw coming. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from and what your local time is in the comments. And if you believe respect should never be judged by appearance, subscribe and join us for more unforgettable stories of dignity, justice, and humanity. Just 45 minutes earlier, Terminal 3 at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport had been moving with its usual rhythm. Business travelers hurried between gates, families pushed overloaded suitcases, and flight announcements echoed through the bright concourse. Isaiah Monroe walked through it all without drawing attention. At 46 years old, the tall black man carried himself with quiet confidence rather than wealth. His dark navy jacket had been carefully pressed, but years of use showed around the cuffs. His leather duffel had been repaired more than once, and the garment bag over his shoulder looked far older than the expensive luggage rolling past him. None of it bothered him. He had spent most of his life teaching people that discipline was measured by character, not appearances. His phone vibrated. Tyrell Brooks's name appeared on the screen. "Master," the young man said excitedly, "has your flight landed yet?" "I'm already at the airport," Isaiah replied with a gentle smile. "The committee keeps asking where you are. Grandmaster Samuel Hahn refused to let anyone else open tomorrow's International Peace Through Martial Arts Summit until you arrive." Isaiah looked toward the enormous windows overlooking the runway. "Tell them not to worry. I'll be there. You still haven't told them you're coming as the keynote speaker, have you?" Isaiah chuckled softly. "I never cared much for introductions." Tyrell laughed. "That's exactly why everyone respects you." After ending the call, Isaiah slipped his phone into his pocket and continued toward the VIP security entrance. Years earlier, Samuel Hahn had personally insisted that Isaiah receive lifetime honorary access whenever he attended international Taekwondo events. Isaiah rarely used the privilege, but this trip required him to pass through quickly before meeting organizers on the other side of security. As he approached the velvet ropes, he noticed several executives waiting in line wearing conference badges around their necks. He quietly joined the back without speaking. Only a few seconds passed before someone deliberately stepped in front of him. Grant Whitaker. The sharply dressed businessman glanced down at Isaiah's worn duffel before looking him up and down with obvious amusement. "You sure you're standing in the right place?" Isaiah answered politely. "I believe so." Grant smirked. "Funny. Most people in this line arrive with briefcases, not camping bags." A few nearby passengers smiled awkwardly. Isaiah ignored the comment. Grant wasn't finished. "You know," he continued loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "there's an economy entrance about 200 feet that way. They probably won't ask as many questions." Several executives exchanged uncomfortable looks. One woman appeared ready to say something before lowering her eyes instead. Isaiah simply thanked Grant for the information. "I appreciate your concern." The calm answer somehow irritated Grant even more. He's either incredibly confident or completely clueless. Before Isaiah could move forward another step, Patricia Vale emerged from the glass doors leading to the VIP lounge. Everything about her reflected corporate perfection. Perfect hair, perfect uniform, perfect smile. Until she looked at Isaiah, the smile disappeared instantly. She didn't greet him. She didn't ask for identification. She didn't request his boarding pass. Instead, she stared directly at his duffel bag. Sir. Isaiah nodded respectfully. Good afternoon. Patricia folded her arms. This entrance is reserved for qualified travelers. I understand. I'm not sure you do. Grant quietly laughed behind her. Patricia continued. Our premium guests expect a certain atmosphere. Isaiah looked confused. I have the required credentials. You haven't shown me anything. You haven't asked. For a brief moment, Patricia had no answer. Instead of requesting his documents, she pressed the radio clip to her shoulder. Security assistance at the VIP checkpoint. Within seconds, Logan Pierce arrived. The young security officer immediately looked from Patricia to Isaiah. Problème? Patricia answered before Isaiah could speak. This gentleman appears confused about where he belongs. Logan turned toward Isaiah. Sir, may I see your boarding pass? Isaiah reached calmly into his jacket. Before he could remove it, Grant interrupted. Don't waste your time. Logan looked over. Grant shrugged. I've seen enough fake boarding passes to know how this ends. A few people laughed. Isaiah slowly withdrew the pass anyway. It's right here. Logan barely glanced toward it before Patricia quietly shook her head. We'll let airport police handle this. Isaiah blinked. May I ask why? Patricia smiled coldly. Because something doesn't feel right. What exactly doesn't feel right? She looked directly into his eyes. You don't look like someone our VIP guests would expect to see standing here. The words settled heavily over the crowd. Even those who had remained silent now shifted uncomfortably. An elderly woman standing nearby finally spoke. Young lady, shouldn't you at least check his ticket? Patricia answered without looking at her. We know how to do our jobs. The woman frowned but stepped back. Isaiah remained perfectly calm. I've traveled enough to know misunderstandings happen. Patricia crossed her arms tighter. Then this shouldn't surprise you. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed across the polished floor. Officer Caleb Ross arrived wearing the dark blue airport police uniform. He looked first at Patricia, then Logan. Finally, Isaiah. What happened? Grant answered before anyone else could. This guy walked into the VIP line pretending he belongs here. Isaiah opened his mouth. I never. Caleb raised one hand. I wasn't asking you. Patricia nodded confidently. Our staff believes he's attempting to gain unauthorized access. Caleb looked Isaiah up and down. His eyes stopped at the worn duffel. Then the repaired shoes. Then Isaiah's calm expression. Something about the silence irritated him immediately. Identification. Isaiah handed it over without hesitation. Caleb barely glanced at the driver's license before giving it back. You carrying any law enforcement credentials? No. Government? No. Corporate executive? Isaiah smiled faintly. No. Grant laughed again. Exactly. Caleb looked back at Isaiah. So why are you in my VIP line? Isaiah answered with the same steady voice he had used throughout the entire encounter. Because I was invited. The officer's expression hardened. And you're going to have to prove that. Around them, more travelers slowed their pace. Several phones were already recording. None of them realized that somewhere beyond the terminal entrance, a convoy carrying one of the world's most respected Taekwondo leaders had just arrived. And within minutes, everything every person standing there believed about Isaiah Monroe was about to collapse. Officer Caleb Ross folded Isaiah Monroe's driver's license in half with one hand before carelessly handing it back. An invitation? He said with a sarcastic chuckle. Everybody suddenly has an invitation when they get caught. A ripple of laughter spread through the growing crowd. Isaiah quietly slipped the license into his wallet. I've done nothing wrong, officer. That's for me to decide. Caleb stepped closer until only inches separated them. Show me your invitation. Isaiah reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and carefully removed a thick white envelope sealed with an elegant gold emblem. Before he could unfold it, Caleb snatched it from his hand. Without even opening it, he glanced at Patricia Vale. You see this? Patricia smiled knowingly. Looks homemade. Grant Whitaker laughed so loudly that several travelers turned to watch. I've seen kindergarten art projects that looked more convincing. Isaiah remained remarkably calm. If you'll simply open it, everything will become clear. Caleb didn't. Instead, he flipped the envelope over once, then tucked it beneath his arm. I'll decide whether it's worth opening. Isaiah's expression remained composed, but his eyes revealed the slightest trace of disappointment. Officer, that document doesn't belong to you. It does now. The words drew uncomfortable glances from several people nearby. The elderly woman who had spoken earlier stepped forward again. "Young man, why won't you just read the invitation?" Caleb didn't even acknowledge her. "Ma'am, please stay out of police business." "But he hasn't done anything." "I said stay back." His sharp tone silenced her. Nearby, Nora Bennett lowered the camera she had been using to interview arriving travelers. She was a local television reporter covering the International Peace Through Martial Arts Summit, hoping to capture footage of athletes arriving from around the world. Instead, she found herself watching something entirely different. She quietly pressed the record button on her phone. Every word, every gesture, every expression. Grant noticed. "Good," he said loudly enough for Nora to hear. "People should see what security has to deal with every day." Isaiah glanced briefly toward the young reporter but said nothing. He had spent decades teaching his students that anger only strengthened those looking for a fight. Caleb circled him slowly. "So, tell me something." Isaiah waited. "What company do you work for?" "I teach." Grant smirked. "A gym instructor?" Isaiah smiled politely. "Something like that." Grant burst into laughter. "I knew it." He looked around at the growing audience. This guy seriously thought teaching karate to kids qualifies him for the VIP entrance. A few people laughed. Others looked increasingly uncomfortable. Isaiah made no attempt to defend himself. His silence frustrated Grant. "You know what I think?" Grant continued. "I think you saw important-looking people standing here and figured nobody would question a confident black man wearing a clean jacket." Patricia nodded. "Confidence isn't the same thing as belonging." Isaiah finally answered, "Respectfully, belonging isn't determined by appearance either." Grant rolled his eyes. "Oh, here comes the inspirational speech." Caleb took another step forward. "Let's make this simple." He pointed toward the regular security checkpoint stretching across the terminal. "You can walk away right now, and this ends." Isaiah looked toward the line. "My flight leaves in less than an hour." "Then you'd better start walking. I was instructed to use this entrance." "By who?" Isaiah paused. "I don't believe their name would mean much to you." Grant laughed again. "Translation? Nobody." Caleb extended his hand. "One last chance." Isaiah didn't move. "I've broken no law." For several long seconds, neither man spoke. The tension became almost unbearable. Finally, Caleb lost his patience. With one sudden motion, he grabbed Isaiah's shoulder and shoved him backward. The force caught several passengers completely off guard. Isaiah stumbled into one of the velvet stanchions. The polished metal post toppled sideways, its red rope crashing onto the marble floor. A child gasped. Someone whispered, "That wasn't necessary." Isaiah steadied himself without raising his hands. "I won't resist." Caleb pointed toward the exit. "Good, because you're leaving." When Isaiah bent down to lift the fallen barrier back into place, Grant shook his head in mock disbelief. "Look at that." Patricia glanced over. Still pretending to be the good guy, Grant smiled cruelly. "They always think acting polite makes people forget they don't belong." Several phones remained pointed directly at Isaiah. None captured anger. None captured violence. Only a quiet black man picking up something another person had knocked over. Nora felt a knot forming in her stomach. This wasn't the story she expected to cover. Something about Isaiah felt different. Not frightened. Not defeated. Simply patient. She zoomed in on his face. No hatred. No panic. Just an almost unbelievable calmness. As Isaiah lifted his duffel from the floor, something slipped from one of the side pockets. A small, worn notebook landed near Nora's feet. She instinctively picked it up. "Sir." Isaiah turned. "I think this belongs to you." Before he could reach for it, Grant snatched the notebook first. "What have we got here?" Isaiah's voice became firmer than before. "Please give it back." Grant flipped through the pages with exaggerated curiosity. Hundreds of names. His smile slowly faded. Every page contained handwritten signatures. Olympic medalists, national champions, military instructors, youth organizations, international federations. Beside, many signatures were handwritten notes. "Thank you for changing my life. I owe my career to your guidance. Forever grateful, Master." Grant frowned. "What is this?" Isaiah extended his hand. "A personal notebook." Grant scoffed. "Looks more like a fantasy collection." He tore one page free. The ripping sound echoed through the terminal. Several people gasped. For the first time since the confrontation began, Isaiah's expression changed. Not anger, not fear, only quiet sadness. "That page cannot be replaced," he said softly. Grant crumpled it into a ball and tossed it toward a nearby trash can. "Then maybe you should have left it at home." Nora stared in disbelief. Even Patricia hesitated. The elderly woman covered her mouth. Isaiah slowly walked toward the discarded paper. He carefully smoothed the wrinkles with both hands before placing it back inside the notebook. No accusation, no shouting, no threats, only dignity. At that exact moment, the terminal loudspeakers announced the arrival of an international delegation. Outside the massive glass entrance, a line of black SUVs rolled to a stop. Airport employees immediately stood straighter. Security personnel adjusted their uniforms. Patricia glanced toward the doors. "They're here." Grant smiled. Perfect timing. Caleb folded his arms confidently. "Let's clear this guy out before our honored guests walk in." None of them realized that the most honored guest among the arriving delegation wasn't looking for the VIP lounge. He was looking for Isaiah Monroe. The row of black SUVs glided to a stop outside Terminal 3. Airport employees immediately straightened their uniforms. Security supervisors hurried toward the entrance, whispering into their radios as members of the international delegation stepped onto the sidewalk. Inside the terminal, however, the confrontation around Isaiah Monroe showed no signs of ending. Officer Caleb Ross glanced through the glass doors before turning back with obvious impatience. "We don't have time for this." He extended his hand. "Give me your boarding pass." Isaiah calmly reached into his jacket and handed it over. Caleb studied it for barely 2 seconds. Instead of scanning the barcode or verifying the reservation, he folded the ticket once and slipped it into his own pocket. "You'll get this back after we finish our investigation." Isaiah remained composed. "Officer, if you keep my boarding pass, I'll miss my flight." "Not me problem." Grant Whitaker smirked. "Looks like your little vacation just got canceled." A few people laughed nervously. The elderly woman who had defended Isaiah stepped forward again. "You can't just take his boarding pass." Caleb shot her an icy look. "Ma'am, unless you want to be escorted out too, I'd suggest you stop interfering." The terminal fell quiet again. Even those recording with their phones looked uncomfortable now. Nora Bennett continued filming without saying a word. Every minute, the situation looked worse for airport security. Isaiah took a slow breath. "I've cooperated with every request." "You've cooperated," Caleb replied, "because you don't have another choice." Isaiah looked directly into the officer's eyes. "I've spent my entire life teaching people that real strength begins with self-control." Grant burst into laughter. "Oh, listen to him." He looked around the crowd dramatically. "The fake philosopher has another speech." Patricia Vale crossed her arms. "Mr. Monroe, whether you're a teacher or not, today's lesson is simple." She pointed toward the public seating area. "People who don't belong in VIP areas eventually leave." Isaiah answered quietly. "Sometimes people decide who belongs before they know the truth." Patricia shrugged. "The truth usually dresses better." Several travelers lowered their heads in embarrassment. The remark had crossed a line. Even Logan Pierce shifted uneasily. He had followed Patricia's lead from the beginning, but something no longer felt right. Isaiah had never argued, never shouted, never threatened anyone. Most people falsely accused of trespassing eventually lost their temper. This man never did. Logan leaned closer to Caleb. "Maybe we should verify his reservation." Caleb didn't even look at him. "I already have." "No, I mean through the airline." "I said I already have." Logan frowned. "You never called anyone." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Are you questioning me?" Logan immediately stepped back. "No, sir." Grant smiled with satisfaction. "Good answer." Isaiah noticed the exchange but remained silent. At that same moment, outside the terminal, Grandmaster Samuel Hahn climbed out of the lead SUV. Though 71 years old, he carried himself with remarkable energy. Behind him walked delegates from South Korea, Japan, Brazil, Canada, Germany, and the United States, along with dozens of elite athletes invited to the International Peace through Martial Arts Summit. Samuel looked around the terminal entrance. "Where is Master Monroe?" Linda Cho checked her phone. "He should have arrived 20 minutes ago." Tyrell Brooks looked concerned. "He never misses appointments." Samuel's smile disappeared. Something is wrong. Without waiting for airport escorts, he walked straight into the terminal. Inside, the argument continued. Caleb removed Isaiah's invitation envelope from beneath his arm. He waved it carelessly. "So this magical invitation." He held it over a nearby trash bin. "Is probably worthless anyway." Isaiah's voice remained calm, but it carried more weight than before. "Officer Ross." Caleb smiled mockingly. "What?" "I would strongly advise you not to damage that document." Grant chuckled. "Listen to him." Patricia added sarcastically, "What happens if he does?" Isaiah answered honestly, "It doesn't belong to me." Grant laughed harder. "Oh, that's rich." "So whose is it?" Isaiah paused. "It belongs to the organization that invited me." Caleb rolled his eyes. "Then they can print another one." With one careless flick of his wrist, He dropped the sealed invitation into the trash. Several people gasped. The elderly woman shook her head in disbelief. Young man, Nora's camera never stopped recording. Isaiah quietly walked toward the trash bin. He reached inside, carefully removed the envelope, brushed away a coffee stain from the corner, and gently straightened the bent edges. He never looked angry, only disappointed. That expression unsettled more people than shouting ever could. Logan finally whispered, "I don't think we're handling this correctly." Patricia immediately replied, "Don't start doubting yourself now." Grant folded his arms confidently. "In 5 minutes, everyone will forget this happened." Just then, applause erupted near the terminal entrance. Passengers instinctively turned. Television cameras rolled into the building. International athletes lined both sides of the corridor. Airport executives hurried forward with welcoming smiles. Samuel Hahn had arrived. Caleb looked toward the entrance and grinned. "Perfect." He straightened his uniform. "Let's show our distinguished guests that airport security keeps order." Patricia adjusted her blazer. Grant buttoned his expensive suit jacket. None of them noticed that Samuel Hahn wasn't looking toward the VIP lounge. He wasn't looking at the welcoming committee. He wasn't looking at the airport executives. His eyes were searching the crowd. Then they stopped. Across the terminal, beside a fallen velvet barrier and surrounded by people who had humiliated him for nearly an hour, stood Isaiah Monroe. Samuel froze. His breathing caught. Emotion filled his face. Tyrell Brooks followed Samuel's gaze and whispered, "He found him." Without another word, the elderly Grandmaster broke away from the delegation. Ignoring every executive waiting to greet him, he walked directly toward the quiet black man everyone else had treated like an unwanted intruder. The crowd instinctively parted. Confused whispers spread through the terminal. Officer Caleb Ross frowned. Where is he going? No one had an answer. Not yet. The entire terminal seemed to hold its breath. Grandmaster Samuel Hahn ignored the line of airport executives waiting with welcome gifts. He walked past television cameras, past international delegates, and past the red carpet prepared in his honor without acknowledging a single person. His eyes never left Isaiah Monroe. Director Elaine Porter, the airport's executive director, hurried after him. "Grandmaster Hahn, this way, please. The reception ceremony is ready." Samuel didn't slow down. "I have someone more important to greet." The interpreter beside him blinked in confusion. "What did he say?" Tyrell Brooks smiled faintly. "You'll understand in a moment." Officer Caleb Ross stepped forward, assuming the elderly Grandmaster wanted help navigating the crowd. He straightened his uniform and extended a welcoming hand. "Welcome to Atlanta, sir. Airport Police. I'm Officer Caleb." Samuel walked right past him as if he weren't there. Caleb's smile froze. Grant Whitaker exchanged a puzzled look with Patricia Vale. "Who is he looking for?" Nobody answered. The distance between Samuel and Isaiah grew shorter with every step. 20 feet. 15. 10. Isaiah quietly placed his repaired notebook back inside his duffel and looked up with the same calm expression he had worn all morning. For the first time since the confrontation began, a faint smile appeared on his face. Samuel, the elderly Grandmaster's eyes immediately grew moist. He stopped directly in front of Isaiah. For one long heartbeat, neither man spoke. Then, before hundreds of stunned travelers, Samuel Hahn removed both white ceremonial gloves from his hands. He placed them carefully inside his jacket. Without the slightest hesitation, he bowed deeply, not the polite nod used in business meetings, not the respectful bow given to honored guests, a full martial arts bow of absolute respect. Nearly 90 degrees. The terminal fell silent. A television cameraman instinctively zoomed in. Another reporter whispered, "Who is that man?" Samuel remained bowed. His voice trembled with emotion. "Master Isaiah, I've been searching for you." Gasps spread across the crowd. Grant frowned. What did he just call him? Patricia stared in disbelief. Caleb looked from Samuel to Isaiah, then back again. Isaiah gently placed one hand beneath Samuel's shoulder. "You never needed to bow to me." Samuel slowly stood. "I always will." The words landed like thunder. Tyrell Brooks walked forward, unable to hide his smile any longer. "It's good to see you again, Master." Isaiah embraced the young man warmly. "You've grown. Only because you taught me." More members of the international delegation began recognizing Isaiah. One after another, they approached respectfully. Several bowed. Others shook his hand with both of theirs. A Japanese coach smiled broadly. "My students still practice the Monroe Principles every morning." A Brazilian Federation president laughed. "Our academy still tells your story to every beginner." A Canadian Olympic coach nodded respectfully. "Half our national team learned leadership from your seminars." Each sentence deepened the silence surrounding Caleb, Patricia, and Grant. None of this matched the image they had created in their minds. Grant finally forced out an awkward laugh. There must be some misunderstanding. Samuel slowly turned toward him. There is. Grant smiled nervously. I knew it. Samuel's expression hardened. The misunderstanding began when you believed appearances reveal character. Grant's smile disappeared. Before anyone could speak again, Linda Cho approached carrying a polished wooden presentation case. She opened it carefully. Inside rested a black belt unlike any most people had ever seen. Its fabric had faded from decades of training. Gold embroidery stretched along its length in Korean and English. Tyrell lifted it gently. Several martial artists nearby instinctively lowered their heads. Nora Bennett quietly whispered into her phone as she continued recording. I think this may be one of the highest honors in Taekwondo. Samuel accepted the belt with both hands. He turned toward Isaiah. You left this behind after the peace summit in Seoul. Isaiah smiled softly. I wondered where it had gone. You entrusted it to me. Samuel's voice became emotional again. I've been waiting 3 years to return it personally. He presented the belt with both hands. Isaiah accepted it with equal respect. No applause. No celebration. Only complete silence. Because everyone watching sensed they were witnessing something extraordinary. Officer Caleb finally stepped forward. Sir. Samuel looked at him. I'm going to need to verify everyone's identity before... Tyrell interrupted. Verify? Caleb nodded. Standard procedure. Tyrell couldn't hide his disbelief. You detained the founding mentor of this entire summit. Caleb frowned. What? Linda Cho looked directly at Director Elaine Porter. Has no one informed airport security who Professor Isaiah Monroe is? Elaine's face turned pale. Professor, Samuel answered quietly. Not Professor. He looked proudly toward Isaiah. The man standing before you is one of the few living grandmasters ever recognized by every major Taekwondo federation represented here today. The crowd collectively inhaled. Samuel continued. He trained champions from 12 nations. He advised military self-defense programs on 3 continents. He created conflict resolution programs that have kept thousands of young people away from gangs. And every international instructor standing behind me calls him by exactly one title. Samuel turned back toward Isaiah. His voice echoed through the terminal. Master. This time, dozens of martial artists responded together. As one, they bowed. Master. The sound swept across the terminal like a wave. Passengers stared in stunned silence. Television cameras captured every second. Nora felt goosebumps rise along her arms. She had arrived expecting a routine airport interview. Instead, she was witnessing the collapse of every assumption that had fueled nearly an hour of humiliation. Officer Caleb's face slowly drained of color. For the first time that morning, he realized he had never even opened Isaiah Monroe's invitation. Not a single sound came from the crowd. The dozens of martial artists remained bowed before Isaiah Monroe for several long seconds before slowly straightening again. Officer Caleb Ross stood frozen. His eyes shifted from Isaiah to the black belt, then to the delegation, as if hoping someone would laugh and admit the entire scene had been an elaborate misunderstanding. No one did. Director Elaine Porter finally stepped forward. Her face had lost every trace of confidence. Mr. Monroe. Isaiah looked at her politely. Good afternoon. She hesitated before speaking again. I owe you an apology. Isaiah gave a small nod. I appreciate that. Elaine looked toward Caleb. Officer. Return Mr. Monroe's boarding pass immediately. Caleb's hand instinctively touched the pocket of his uniform. For the first time all morning, he seemed unsure of himself. He removed the boarding pass with trembling fingers and held it toward Isaiah. I'm sorry. Isaiah accepted it calmly. Thank you. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't embarrass the officer. His quiet dignity somehow made Caleb feel even smaller. Samuel Hahn watched silently. He had seen this kind of composure before. It was exactly how Isaiah had handled every insult throughout his career, never seeking revenge, always choosing discipline. Linda Cho suddenly looked around. Where is the invitation? Isaiah remained silent. Caleb's face tightened. Patricia Vale slowly turned toward the trash bin. Her heartbeat quickened. Everyone followed her gaze. The white envelope. The one Caleb had thrown away. Coffee stains marked one corner. The gold seal had been bent. Linda walked over carefully and picked it up with both hands. She examined the damaged envelope for a moment before looking directly at Director Porter. Do you know what this is? Elaine quietly answered, En invitation. Linda shook her head. No. She gently brushed away the remaining coffee drops. This invitation was printed individually. She carefully opened the envelope. Inside rested a heavy, cream-colored card embossed in gold. The crowd leaned closer. Linda began reading aloud. The International Peace Through Martial Arts Summit proudly welcomes Grandmaster Isaiah Monroe as our guest of honor and recipient of the Lifetime Legacy of Peace Award. Silence, she continued. Reserved VIP arrival. International ceremonial reception. Official security escort authorized upon arrival. Another pause. Opening address before delegates representing 36 nations. Every word struck Caleb harder than the last. Grant Whitaker swallowed. Patricia couldn't even meet Isaiah's eyes anymore. Nora Bennett whispered into her microphone. This wasn't a VIP passenger. She paused. This was the guest every VIP had actually come to meet. The realization spread through the terminal like wildfire. People who had laughed only minutes earlier now looked visibly ashamed. The elderly woman who had defended Isaiah slowly approached him. "I'm so sorry for what happened to you." Isaiah smiled warmly. "You have nothing to apologize for." "No." Her eyes became watery. "I should have spoken louder." Isaiah gently shook his head. "You spoke when it mattered." She smiled through tears. "Thank you." Nearby, Logan Pierce removed his security badge from around his neck for a moment and sighed deeply. He turned toward Caleb. "I told you we should verify the reservation." Caleb didn't answer. He couldn't, because Logan was right. One phone call, one scan of the boarding pass, one look inside the envelope. Any one of those simple actions could have prevented everything. Instead, he had chosen assumptions. Samuel finally stepped toward Caleb. His voice remained calm. "Officer." Caleb immediately straightened. "Sir." Samuel looked directly into his eyes. "Do you know why Master Isaiah has never introduced himself by his titles?" Caleb slowly shook his head. "No. Because he believes respect earned through character lasts longer than respect demanded by reputation." Samuel's words carried through the silent terminal. For more than 25 years, he has refused reserved seating unless absolutely necessary. He stands in ordinary lines. He eats with volunteers instead of dignitaries. He visits youth centers before luxury hotels. And every year, Samuel smiled proudly, he quietly pays travel expenses for students who could never afford international competition. Tyrell nodded. "I was one of those students." Everyone turned toward him. "My mother worked 2 jobs. We couldn't even afford a local tournament." Tyrell looked at Isaiah. "He never told anyone. He simply mailed us airline tickets. I didn't even know who paid until years later." Another coach stepped forward. "So was I." Then another. "And my academy." A woman from Canada raised her hand. "Our refugee program still exists because of Master Monroe." A Brazilian instructor smiled. "He rebuilt our training center after the floods. 1 story became 2. 2 became 5. Soon, the terminal echoed with testimony from people whose lives Isaiah had quietly transformed. Not once did Isaiah interrupt. Not once did he seek recognition. Grant's face had turned completely pale. The man he had mocked as a fraud had spent decades helping strangers around. Patricia felt her stomach tighten. She remembered saying, "The truth usually dresses better." Now those words echoed inside her mind like a cruel joke. Director Elaine Porter slowly faced her own staff. "Is every airport camera recording this area?" A supervisor answered immediately. "Yes, Director." "Good." Her voice became firm. "Preserve every second." Caleb looked up sharply. "Every second?" "Including the shove, the insults, the confiscated boarding pass, the destroyed notebook page, the discarded invitation. Everything." His heartbeat accelerated. Grant quietly stepped backward. Patricia did the same. Neither wanted to remain at the center of the crowd any longer. Then Nora Bennett lowered her phone and calmly spoke. "I'm afraid leaving won't help." Grant froze. She looked at all 3 of them. "My station has been broadcasting this live for the last 14 minutes. Every drop of color disappeared from Grant's face. Caleb stared at her. "Leave?" Nora nodded. "Our newsroom switched to the feed when the international delegation arrived." She looked toward the television cameras. "Millions of viewers have already watched everything." A heavy silence settled over the terminal. Outside, more news vans pulled into the airport. Inside, Director Elaine Porter slowly closed her eyes. She realized this was no longer just an airport incident. It had become a national story, and the consequences were only beginning. The silence inside Terminal 3 lasted only a few seconds before panic quietly took its place. Grant Whitaker was the first to recover. He forced a nervous laugh and adjusted his expensive tie. "Come on," he said, glancing around at the crowd. "This whole thing is obviously a misunderstanding. Nobody intended to disrespect anyone." No one answered. The passengers who had laughed with him earlier deliberately looked away. Grant quickly turned toward Isaiah. "If anything I said came across the wrong way, I'm sure we can move past it. Isaiah regarded him calmly. What exactly do you believe came across the wrong way? Grant opened his mouth, then closed it again. He couldn't answer, because everyone there had heard exactly what he had said. There was no misunderstanding, only witnesses. Patricia Vale stepped forward next. Mr. Monroe, I would like to personally invite you into our executive lounge. Isaiah looked at her without anger. You mean the lounge where I wasn't welcome 40 minutes ago? Patricia swallowed hard. We didn't know who you were. Isaiah's expression remained gentle. And if I had been exactly who you thought I was, would I have deserved different treatment? The question struck harder than any accusation. Patricia lowered her eyes. She had no answer. Director Elaine Porter watched the exchange in complete silence. She knew Isaiah wasn't seeking revenge. He was exposing something much deeper. Officer Caleb Ross suddenly spoke. I was only following security protocol. Before Isaiah could respond, Nora Bennett calmly walked forward. She lowered her microphone. Officer, may I ask one question? Caleb nodded cautiously. Go ahead. Nora looked directly at him. What security protocol tells an officer to shove someone before checking their boarding pass? Caleb hesitated. I believed. No, she interrupted politely. I asked about protocol. Another pause. What protocol authorizes throwing away an official invitation? Caleb looked toward the floor. Nora continued. What protocol allows evidence to remain unopened because of assumptions? The officer couldn't answer. She wasn't attacking him. She was simply repeating facts already recorded on camera. Chief Raymond Keller hurried into the terminal surrounded by several senior airport police supervisors. His expression was grim. Officer Ross. Caleb immediately stood at attention. Sir. Chief Keller looked around the terminal. Television cameras, international delegates, airport executives, hundreds of witnesses. Then his eyes stopped on Isaiah. He quietly walked over. Mr. Monroe. Isaiah nodded respectfully. Chief, I've just reviewed the first security footage. Caleb's stomach tightened. Chief Keller turned back toward him. Did you verify Mr. Monroe's boarding pass? No, sir. Did you scan his credentials? No, sir. Did you inspect the invitation before confiscating it? No, sir. Every answer became heavier than the last. Chief Keller spoke again. So your decision was based entirely on appearance. Caleb remained silent. The chief didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Everyone already understood. Grant suddenly interrupted. Officer Ross wasn't the only one involved. The crowd turned toward him. Grant pointed toward Patricia. She called security. Patricia immediately fired back. You were the one encouraging him the entire time. Grant shook his head. You made the first accusation. You kept making racist comments. I never said anything racist. Nora calmly lifted her phone. The live stream says otherwise. Grant froze. She tapped the screen. Would you like me to replay your exact words? He slowly stepped backward. No. The crowd had changed completely. Less than an hour earlier, they had quietly watched Isaiah endure humiliation. Now they watched the people responsible trying desperately to escape responsibility. Samuel Hahn observed everything without speaking. Finally, he looked toward Isaiah. Master. Isaiah met his eyes. Yes? Do you remember what you told me 22 years ago after I lost my temper during the Osaka seminar? Isaiah smiled faintly. I've forgotten many things. I haven't. Samuel's voice carried across the terminal. You said. He paused. The easiest victory is defeating an opponent. The hardest victory is refusing to become one. Several athletes quietly nodded. They had heard that lesson before. Samuel continued. You've lived those words every day since. Tyrell stepped beside Isaiah. They insulted you. Another instructor joined him. They shoved you. A third spoke. They destroyed your property. The elderly woman added softly. They treated you as less than human. Samuel looked directly at Isaiah. Yet you never hated them. Isaiah answered quietly enough that everyone leaned in to hear. Hatred teaches nothing. Another silence settled over the terminal. Then Director Elaine Porter made a decision. She turned toward the airport's legal counsel. I want every employee involved removed from active duty pending a full investigation. Patricia's eyes widened. Director. Elaine raised one hand. I'm not finished. She looked toward Caleb. Officer Ross, surrender your badge. The terminal erupted into whispers. Caleb stared in disbelief. My badge? Now. His hands trembled as he slowly unclipped the silver badge from his uniform. For nearly 16 years, he had worn it every day. Now he placed it into the chief's waiting hand. Chief Keller accepted it without a word. Elaine faced Patricia next. Your access credentials. Patricia slowly removed the executive identification card hanging around her neck. She could barely breathe. Finally, Elaine looked at Grant. Mr. Whitaker. Grant forced a smile. I don't actually work for the airport. No. Elaine's voice became firm, but every camera here captured your conduct. She turned toward the media. I'm confident your employer will see it before the day is over. Grant's face turned ghostly white. His phone began vibrating. Then again, and again, the screen filled with incoming calls. Corporate headquarters. His assistant. His wife. Then a message appeared across the display. Urgent. Do not speak to the media until legal contacts you. Grant's hands started shaking. Isaiah quietly watched the scene unfold. He felt no satisfaction, only sadness, because none of this had begun with anger. It had begun with assumptions, and those assumptions had destroyed several lives in less than 1 hour. But Isaiah also knew the greatest truth had not yet been revealed. The constant vibration of Grant Whitaker's phone echoed louder than the whispers surrounding him. He stared at the screen. 6 missed calls, then 10, then 15. The company logo flashed across the display again. This time he answered, Grant speaking. The voice on the other end didn't even greet him. What have you done? Grant glanced nervously toward the cameras. It's being exaggerated. No. The CEO's voice grew colder. We're watching the live stream from the boardroom. Grant felt every pair of eyes around him. I can explain. You can explain after you clean out your office. Grant's heart stopped. Sir, your employment is terminated effective immediately. The line went dead. His phone slipped from his trembling hand and struck the polished floor. Nobody moved to help him. Only an hour earlier, he had laughed while Isaiah picked up his own belongings. Now he was the one standing alone. Director Elaine Porter quietly addressed the waiting media. Members of the press, the airport accepts full responsibility for what occurred today. Every piece of security footage has been preserved, and an independent investigation begins immediately. Reporters immediately began shouting questions. Was racial profiling involved? Will the officers face disciplinary action? Will the airport apologize publicly? Elaine answered only once. The evidence will speak for itself. Meanwhile, Chief Raymond Keller escorted Officer Caleb Ross away from the crowd. Before they reached the hallway, Caleb suddenly stopped walking. I'd like to say something. The chief studied him for a long moment before nodding. Caleb slowly turned back toward Isaiah. The confidence that had filled his voice earlier had completely disappeared. I've been wearing this badge for almost 16 years. Nobody interrupted. I kept telling myself I could judge people in seconds. He swallowed hard. I thought experience made me accurate. He looked directly at Isaiah. But experience without humility becomes arrogance. His voice cracked. I never looked at your boarding pass. I never opened your invitation. I never listened. He lowered his head. I only looked at your skin, your clothes, and your bag. The confession settled over the terminal like a heavy weight. No excuse, no denials, only the truth. Isaiah regarded him quietly. What matters now is what you choose to become after today. Caleb looked up, surprised. You don't hate me? Isaiah answered without hesitation. If hatred could change people, the world would have changed long ago. Samuel Hahn smiled faintly. Those were exactly the words he expected. Nora Bennett felt herself lowering the camera for the first time since the confrontation began. She realized this story was no longer about humiliation. It was about character. At that moment, Linda Cho received a phone call. She listened for several seconds before smiling. She walked toward Isaiah. The World Taekwondo Council has just finished an emergency vote. Isaiah looked confused. Emergency vote? They've been watching the live stream. Several delegates exchanged surprised glances. Linda continued. They believe today's events demonstrated everything your life's work has stood for. Samuel already knew what was coming. He smiled proudly. Linda unfolded a printed statement, effective immediately. She paused as dozens of cameras focused on her. The council unanimously approves the creation of the Isaiah Monroe International Leadership Scholarship. The crowd applauded. It will provide full training, education, travel expenses, and leadership development for underprivileged students from every continent. Another wave of applause swept through the terminal. Tyrell wiped tears from his eyes. You never wanted anything named after you. Isaiah smiled gently. I still don't. Samuel laughed softly. I know. That's exactly why you deserve it. Director Elaine Porter stepped forward again. Master Monroe. Isaiah turned toward her. The airport would like to rename our annual Community Leadership Award in your honor as well. Isaiah politely shook his head. I appreciate the kindness. Elaine waited. But I'd like to ask for something else. Anything. Isaiah looked around the terminal, at the officers, at the employees, at the passengers, then back at Elaine. Don't place my name on a plaque. The room became completely quiet. Instead, he pointed toward the long security lines stretching across the terminal. Train every employee who wears this airport's badge. He looked toward Caleb. Teach them that every traveler deserves dignity before verification. He looked toward Patricia. Teach them that uniforms never replace compassion. He looked toward the crowd. And teach them that respect should never depend on appearance. No applause followed, only silence. Because every person understood the weight of those words. Elaine slowly nodded. It will be done. I promise. Chief Keller stepped beside her. So will the police department. Samuel smiled proudly. I told you. Tyrell looked at him. Told who? Samuel's eyes never left Isaiah. I told every Grandmaster here that the greatest teacher in our profession wasn't the strongest fighter. He paused. He was the man who never stopped teaching, even while people were humiliating him. The delegation quietly bowed once again. Not because protocol required it, because respect demanded it. Across the terminal, passengers who had watched silently during Isaiah's humiliation now began applauding one by one. The applause spread slowly, then steadily. Soon, the entire terminal was standing. Some applauded with tears in their eyes. Others simply lowered their heads in shame. Isaiah acknowledged them with a modest nod. He never celebrated. He never looked triumphant. He simply picked up his repaired duffel bag, adjusted the worn garment bag over his shoulder, and prepared to continue toward the gate. For him, the greatest victory had never been proving people wrong. It had always been proving that dignity could remain unbroken. But before he could take another step, Director Elaine Porter's phone rang. She listened for only a few seconds. Her expression changed completely. She slowly looked up at Isaiah. Master Monroe, the governor just called. Every conversation inside Terminal 3 stopped. Director Elaine Porter slowly lowered her phone, still staring at Isaiah Monroe. The governor watched the entire live stream, she said quietly. He's requesting to speak with you personally. A state police officer immediately stepped forward, holding out the secure phone with both hands. Isaiah accepted it politely. Governor. The voice on the other end carried both authority and humility. Master Monroe, I'm deeply sorry for what happened today. Isaiah answered gently. I appreciate your call. I've already contacted the airport authority and the state attorney's office. A formal review has been ordered. But before any investigation begins, I wanted to thank you. Isaiah smiled faintly. For what? For showing millions of Americans what real strength looks like. The governor paused. Most people would have responded with anger. Isaiah looked across the terminal. I've spent my life teaching that anger wins arguments but rarely changes hearts. When the call ended, the governor's words spread quickly through the crowd. Another wave of reporters rushed toward the terminal entrance. National news networks had arrived. Satellite trucks filled the curb outside. Inside, the giant airport television screens interrupted regular programming. Breaking news. World-renowned Taekwondo Grandmaster humiliated at Atlanta Airport. Passengers throughout the terminal stopped walking. Some recognized Isaiah immediately from the live broadcast. Others looked at the television, then at the quiet black man standing only a few yards away. One by one, strangers approached. A young father stepped forward first. He held the hand of his 8-year-old son. Sir, Isaiah turned. I don't know anything about Taekwondo. The father hesitated, but I know what my son just watched. He looked down at the little boy. I wanted him to meet the man who chose dignity instead of revenge. Isaiah knelt so he could speak at the child's eye level. What is your name? Ethan. Were you afraid while watching? The boy nodded. I thought you were going to hit the policeman. Isaiah smiled warmly. I wanted to. The crowd looked surprised. He continued. Every person feels anger. He gently placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Courage isn't pretending anger doesn't exist. It's choosing not to let anger make your decisions. The little boy smiled. I want to remember that. I hope you do. Nearby, Nora Bennett wiped away a tear. She had interviewed governors, celebrities, and professional athletes. None had impressed her the way Isaiah had. Samuel Hahn quietly walked beside her. You understand now? Nora nodded. I thought today was going to be the biggest story of my career. Samuel smiled. It still is. She looked confused. It's just not the story I expected. At that moment, Linda Cho received another message. She read it once. Then again, she laughed softly. Samuel raised an eyebrow. What happened? The International Olympic Committee just released a statement. She handed him the phone. Samuel smiled broadly before reading it aloud. The values demonstrated today by Grandmaster Isaiah Monroe represent the highest ideals of sport, leadership, and humanity. His example will be included in next year's International Ethics Education Program for youth coaches worldwide. The terminal erupted into applause once again. Isaiah looked genuinely embarrassed. I don't deserve all this attention. Samuel laughed. You've spent 30 years avoiding attention. Tyrell grinned. Looks like attention finally caught you. Everyone laughed. Even Chief Raymond Keller allowed himself a small smile. Then his expression became serious again. He stepped toward the microphones. As Chief of Airport Police, I have one final statement. The room immediately quieted. Officer Caleb Ross has been placed on indefinite administrative leave, pending the outcome of an independent investigation. Caleb lowered his head. Chief Keller continued. Should the investigation confirm violations of departmental policy and civil rights protections, every appropriate disciplinary measure will be taken. He looked directly into the cameras. No badge is more important than public trust. Director Elaine Porter followed. Patricia Vale's employment with the airport has been terminated effective immediately. Patricia closed her eyes. She didn't protest. She knew why. Elaine wasn't finished. Beginning next month, every airport employee, from executives to security officers, will complete mandatory training in bias awareness, professional conduct, and respectful passenger engagement. She turned toward Isaiah. This program will begin with a lesson inspired by your words. Isaiah looked surprised. What lesson? Elaine answered without hesitation. Every traveler deserves dignity before verification. The sentence echoed through the terminal. Passengers quietly repeated it to one another. Nora immediately wrote it into her notebook. She already knew it would become tomorrow's headline. Grant Whitaker suddenly stepped forward. He no longer looked like the confident executive who had mocked Isaiah earlier. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His tie hung loose. His shoulders were slumped. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. No one interrupted him. He faced Isaiah directly. My father taught me that successful people could judge others by how they dressed. His voice trembled. I never questioned him. He looked around the terminal. I've probably walked past hundreds of decent people without ever seeing them. Then he looked back at Isaiah. I saw your skin. I saw your old bag. I saw your worn shoes. But I never saw you. Tears filled his eyes. I'm ashamed of the man I've become. Isaiah studied him for several quiet seconds. Finally, he extended his hand. Grant stared at it in disbelief. You're shaking my hand? Isaiah nodded. I'm giving you something more valuable. Grant whispered, What? A chance. The businessman slowly accepted the handshake. His tears finally fell, because he understood. Forgiveness didn't erase what had happened, but it gave him one opportunity to become someone different from the man he had been that morning. And in that moment, the greatest victory inside Terminal 3 wasn't the exposure of prejudice. It was the possibility that prejudice had finally begun to lose. The applause slowly faded, but the emotion inside Terminal 3 remained. Isaiah Monroe quietly picked up his worn leather duffel, adjusted the faded garment bag over his shoulder, and prepared to continue toward the security checkpoint. For nearly 2 hours, the airport had revolved around him. Now he simply wanted to catch his flight. Director Elaine Porter stepped in front of him. Master Monroe. Isaiah smiled politely. Yes? There is one more thing. She turned toward the airline executives waiting nearby. The airport would be honored if you accepted a private escort to your aircraft. Isaiah looked toward the long security lines stretching across the terminal. Families stood with tired children. An elderly veteran leaned on a cane. A young mother struggled with 2 heavy suitcases while balancing a sleeping toddler on her shoulder. Isaiah gently shook his head. I'll wait with everyone else. Elaine looked surprised. You don't have to. I know. He smiled warmly. But if I skip the line today, someone may think respect belongs only to important people. The words settled over everyone within earshot. Without another sentence, Isaiah quietly walked toward the regular security line. Several passengers immediately stepped aside. No, sir, one businessman said respectfully. Please go ahead of me. Another traveler nodded. You've waited long enough. Isaiah thanked each of them. I appreciate your kindness. Then he remained exactly where he had chosen to stand, in line, like everyone else. Chief Raymond Keller watched silently. Finally, he turned toward every police officer present. Remember this moment. The officers looked at him. That man has every reason to demand special treatment. He paused. And he's the only person here refusing it. Not a single officer spoke. Across the terminal, maintenance workers quietly reassembled the velvet barrier that had been knocked to the floor during the confrontation. An older janitor carefully picked up the crumpled page Grant Whitaker had torn from Isaiah's notebook. He smoothed the wrinkles as best he could before walking over. Sir. Isaiah accepted the page gently. Thank you. The janitor looked embarrassed. I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner. Isaiah carefully placed the repaired page back inside the notebook. Sometimes courage arrives late. The man lowered his head. But it still arrives. The janitor smiled through watery eyes. I'll remember that. Nearby, Nora Bennett closed her camera case. Her producer approached. Fantastic work. She looked at the terminal one last time. No. Her voice was quiet. This wasn't my story. It belonged to him. Her producer smiled. What will you call tonight's broadcast? Nora didn't hesitate. The Man Who Never Stopped Teaching. Samuel Hahn overheard the title and nodded with quiet approval. It fits. Several hours later, the opening ceremony of the International Peace Through Martial Arts Summit began. More than 5,000 people filled the convention hall. Delegates from 36 countries stood as Isaiah walked onto the stage. The standing ovation lasted nearly 4 minutes. When the applause finally faded, Isaiah stepped behind the podium. He looked across the enormous audience. Then he smiled. I know many of you expected me to speak about martial arts. Soft laughter echoed through the hall. But today, he paused. I'd rather speak about airports. The audience laughed again. Isaiah's expression became thoughtful. This morning, several people judged me before they knew me. He looked toward Samuel. They judged my skin, then toward Tyrell. They judged my clothes, then toward the audience. They judged my luggage. He rested both hands on the podium. But here's the lesson. When we judge people before we know their story, we don't reveal who they are. We reveal who we are. Complete silence filled the convention center. Isaiah continued. Every person you meet is carrying something invisible. Aborden, a dream, a sacrifice, a battle. You may never see it, but your kindness or your cruelty will become part of that story. Several delegates quietly wiped away tears. Isaiah smiled again. This morning, I wasn't the only person being tested. The airport was tested. The police were tested. The passengers were tested. So was I. He looked toward the front row, where Caleb Ross sat beside Chief Keller. Though suspended from duty, Caleb had been invited by Samuel Hahn to attend. Isaiah met his eyes. The purpose of every test is not to prove perfection. It's to reveal what still needs to grow. Caleb slowly nodded, tears filling his eyes. The audience followed Isaiah's gaze. No one applauded. The moment was too personal. Too honest. Isaiah finished with the same quiet voice that had carried him through every insult that morning. If today's story changes even one person's heart, then every painful moment was worth enduring. The convention hall erupted into the longest standing ovation of the summit, not because the greatest Grandmaster had spoken, but because the greatest lesson had come from a man who never needed revenge to prove his strength. Months later, Terminal 3 at Atlanta International Airport looked different. Every airport employee completed new dignity and bias awareness training. Large signs near every security checkpoint displayed a simple sentence inspired by Isaiah's words. Every traveler deserves dignity before verification. Officer Caleb Ross resigned from law enforcement. A year later, he accepted a position mentoring troubled teenagers through community sports programs. Grant Whitaker volunteered with youth leadership organizations while rebuilding both his career and his character from the ground up. Patricia Vale publicly apologized and later became an advocate for customer service reform in the hospitality industry. None of their journeys erased the harm they had caused, but each chose to become better than the person they had been that morning. As for Isaiah Monroe, he returned to teaching exactly as he always had. No headlines, no interviews, no celebration, just another class. Another student, another opportunity to remind someone that true strength is measured not by how powerfully you can strike, but by how faithfully you choose compassion when the world gives you every reason not to. The strongest people are not those who can defeat others, but those who refuse to let bitterness define them. Every stranger you meet carries a story you cannot see. Choose kindness before judgment and respect before assumptions. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories that remind us why dignity always matters.